about to talk to Jason Carter, the grandson of the late president. But first, take a look at this moment from the GMA vault when President Carter joined GMA Live for a very special surprise for an incredible little boy, Maddie Stepanek, an 11-year-old with muscular dystrophy. Take a look.
And you've talked to Jimmy Carter on the phone, have you? He took your phone calls?
Yes.
To talk about your poetry? And you said someday you'd like to meet him?
Yes, I do.
How about today?
Any day.
And if you look on over there, I think you'll find that he's here and he'd like to meet you.
Hello.
Hello.
One of the great ambitions of my life is to meet Maddie, and I'm glad to see you.
I'm glad to see you.
And I'm so proud of your poetry book. Mine, I wrote a poetry book a few years ago. It never got on the New York Times bestseller list.
What a beautiful
what a moment.
So special. And we're now joined by Jimmy Carter's grandson, Jason Carter. It is so nice to see you, Jason. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're glad to have you. We are sorry for your loss, but we also want to remember the man, Jimmy Carter. You were a toddler when he was president. What are your memories of growing up with a grandfather who happened to be one of the most powerful men in the world?
Well, you know, as you saw from that clip, I mean, he's also a pretty great, just regular guy. And one of the best things we've all been talking about lately, for 40 years, we had a Carter family trip that they essentially hosted over New Year's. And so this is one of those days, New Year's Eve, that we spent together for my whole life. So a huge number of my memories with him are, you know, sipping champagne on New Year's and hanging out on this just exactly like today.
So you all enjoyed a glass of champagne on New Year's Eve. Do you have any favorite memories?
You know, of course, I mean, you know, he was my grandfather, and so I have a lot of memories of, like others do, of him taking me fishing or, you know, sitting around talking about what I should do in my life. I mean, you know, when I graduated from college, he and I sat down and I said, what would you do if you were me? And he said, I would go to Africa and join the Peace Corps. And so I did that, you know, I mean, and so he's an interesting guy, but he really was a grandfather to me first.
I'm also curious because you ended up in politics as well, and I'm sure that came up in your conversations with him. What did he think about all of that, and how did he guide you?
You know, I think, you know, he's one of those people who demonstrates that you can be in politics and not change who you are, that you can be an honest person, a person who lives out his faith and love in the real world and still be in politics. And I think that was my hope. You know, our politics is messy. And he was always one of those rare people who was able to reach the highest levels of it without compromising who he was. And we talked about that aspect of it a lot. His actual campaign advice was not super helpful, but otherwise, his advice about how to be a good person was always great.
Wait, what was his campaign advice that didn't pan out?
No, I just mean, you know, he ran for office in a time where he shook 600,000 hands in order to run for governor. Right? I mean, it was real talking to people, and these days it's so much about raising money and you know, trying to get on TV, et cetera, that it's just a different world, and in many ways a worse one. But you know, he was a remarkable person who did change with the times, and you know, never that picture of him and my grandmother really, I think, sums up who they are. I mean, that love story is one of the great American love stories.
A truly beautiful relationship. Speaking of money, he was famously frugal. And I understand there is a very funny story about replacing appliances, or he really didn't want you to do such a thing.
Oh, no, I mean, they even to this day, the microwave in the kitchen in their house ticks when you turn it up to 2 minutes, you know, tick, tick, tick. I mean, you know, their phone has a cord today. Because why would you get a new phone if this one works perfectly fine? I mean, they grew up in that Depression era. You know, he spent 8 years in politics, and the other 92 years he spent at home in Plains, Georgia. Obviously working around the world, doing things for the Carter Center and otherwise. But really, he was a small town guy who lived out that faith that is reflected in that picture and the love that's reflected in that picture.
Well, and I think a lot of people can relate to that idea of small town principles, Depression era grandparents, for example. How are you now furthering your grandfather's vision at the Carter Center?
Sure. Well, I mean, he built this remarkable organization over 40 years of that's really been his life's work. And there's 3,000 employees that work all over the world. He won, in part, the Nobel Peace Prize for his work at the Carter Center, working on peace, democracy, human rights, and health. And the Carter Center is continuing to do that work today. And of those 3,000 employees, only a couple hundred are in the U.S., and the rest are in Ethiopia or Sudan or Mali or Chad or Bangladesh, the places where the center can do the most good for the most people. And it's been remarkable for me to be able to be the chair of that board for the last several years and to do that work with him.
Well, we wish you and your family well. We know you'll be delivering a eulogy at the funeral, and we just really appreciate you sharing those lovely memories with us this morning.
Thank you very much. And this day is a day of reflection for all of us, looking back, and we're also looking towards the future of us all continuing that legacy. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Jason, and Happy New Year to you and your family.
You too.